Welcome, boys and girls. Christine here with a discussion about Miao Ying, the Storm Dragon in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires, and why she's actually the worst legendary lord of Grand Cathay. There are a large number of reasons. Part of it is faction effects, part of it is how she's designed as a legendary lord, and part of it is campaign dynamics that don't really favor her. Now, it's interesting to think about the situation because when Realms of Chaos came out, playing Xiao Ming was flat out not worth it. And not because Xiao Ming was ever bad, but because Miao Ying's AI would ensure that you not only have to play all of the things that Xiao Ming had to deal with in his campaign side of things, but also all the things of Miao Ying's campaigns. You might as well just play Miao Ying, because, yeah, if you're gonna do that, might as well play the Legendary Lord that's actually meant to deal with those things. So let's take a look at her Legendary Lord design, her campaign situation, and the issues that come from all of them. So, faction effect wise, you get a defensive supply benefit, which is not really good, because the way sieges work out, for the most part, you either have a lot of defensive supplies that you're going to get throughout the siege, or you are losing that battle. If you're ever in a position where 300 supply would ever make a real difference in a battle, I think that is a battle you've already lost. Because you should be able to delay an opponent, most of the time, to the point that 300 supply would make a fairly minimal difference. So it sounds like a big number, but like if we were talking about 1,000 supplies, 2,000 supplies, that would be a difference. That would actually be an entire tower, but not 300. Then you get a minus 30% construction cost for the Great Bastion buildings, corruption, leadership when fighting against chaos, ammunition. Now, those benefits of corruption, leadership, and construction cost are completely pointless. Because one thing Cathay doesn't struggle with is money. And even though certain Great Bastion structures might become expensive later on, early on, they're fairly cheap and affordable. In fact, Cathay can mass one of the largest number of armies in the campaign because of the way their economy works. So having a construction benefit doesn't really matter, because you're also really limited with the Great Bastion's growth. So because of the way the Great Bastion grows, even if you do get the growth building, even if you do get the commandment gives you growth, it's just going to grow that slow. They're getting to the point of tier 4, tier 5 when things do start getting expensive. It's not going to matter. You're going to have a lot of cash that you're going to roll into. A corruption benefit, pretty meaningless due to the way the corruption works. Now, if they do rework corruption to work in a different way than it does in the base game, sure, I could potentially see that having a bigger role. But even then, I really hope that they don't go down that path again, because it was a really bad system the way corruption worked before. If they do improve the system, it should be brand new, and it should actually be a better system than what we had to deal with. But as it stands, corruption is not meaningful. Okay, what about leadership against chaotic factions? Well, that would be good if you were Skaven or Vampire Coast. But you look at Cathay in leadership, it's not the highest in the game, but even regular peasant long spearmen have 55 leadership by default. So what is the value proposition? And you can also get battle harmony, which also increases leadership. So what is the value proposition in getting more leadership when your armies are already nigh on unbreakable? You don't want unbreakable armies. You want your units to actually rout at one point if they're getting annihilated, because that's how you preserve them on the campaign side of things. So you can actually end up in a situation where having too much leadership is not a great thing. Like, basically, you just kind of want units to fight until they're almost dead, and then you want them to rout and survive the battle. That's the ideal use case scenario of units. But in every campaign that I've played in Cathay, from the very beginning of Warhammer 3, leadership has been the least issue to deal with. Even if we set the AI stats modifier to the highest level. I guess it could be more useful if you're fighting garrison battles and all that, but not really a great benefit. So 4 out of 5 faction benefits are meaningless. So effectively, if we discount the 5th, we're playing a generic faction. Consider Xiao Ming's campaign benefits, or Yan Bo's campaign benefits, or the benefits that the vast majority of Legendary Lords do have in the game, they're actually generally more useful. That leaves you with 20% more ammunition for all armies. Now, that is not something to joke around, it is a fairly substantial benefit. How much does it matter? Well, that depends on the kind of battles you're playing. Cathayan units, funnily enough, do actually have a fairly good amount of ammunition. So yes, if you are fighting foes that outnumber you, and you're having to fight like 6 Skaven stacks, and you're running out of ammo, which, by the way, was certainly a serious issue that people were encountering when, let's say, playing Emmerich back in Warhammer 2, running out of ammo, then yes. Or a very long battle, or very sturdy units. But again, I emphasize, Cathay is in the kind of state as a race at the moment where they can mass so many armies and it is so ridiculously powerful. I'm not sure if campaign configuration is enabled, right? No, it's not. So I don't think I'm using an upkeep benefit. Yeah, whatever. Like, yeah, Cathayan units have low upkeep. But still, the point is, unless you're fighting vastly outnumbered, which is not a situation you should encounter as Cathay, you will be able to generally avoid issues with ammo. Typically, if it's issues with ammo, it's issues with artillery ammo, and very rarely will you have a situation where you run out of crossbow ammo. It is useful, I won't dispute that, but it's only one faction effect that's useful, and it's only useful in very specific situations. So our faction effects are pretty lackluster, to put it mildly. I'm not sure what Creative Assembly has against, like, the first Legendary Lord that they designed for a race. Because you look at a lot of baseline Legendary Lords, not many of them are great. Sure, we have Arturians and we have our Karl Francis, absolutely. But what does Creative Assembly have against Caster Lords? Or women, for that matter? Yeah, I'm quite serious on that, the latter point. You look at Lariel's campaign, not a fucking great campaign. You look at Hellbrunn, you look at Valkia being a meme from the very announcement trailer of her. Like, she's not bad, but if you're telling me Valkia is the best Khorne or Warriors of Chaos campaign, no. It's either mediocrity or just being rubbish. Oh, but you might say Morathi and Elspeth. Yes, with Morathi, just worth mentioning how long it took to make that campaign good, as in the entirety of freaking Warhammer 2, and only in Warhammer 3 because of specific things. So you're kind of like left with Elspeth being the only good female character in this entire game that actually has a good campaign from the very launch of it. Says something about it. And the only good caster campaign that was introduced. And yeah, she's not a launch campaign. I mean, I guess Woman's Decay ended up doing a lot of things very well from that perspective. But then you gotta realize Gelt and Karl Franz are running circles around Elspeth in our campaign too. Just a joke. But I do think it's more so that Creative Assembly was trying to either make some unique campaigns and the systems didn't work, or in the case of Miao Ying, they were trying to make a generic campaign work. Tyrion is the baseline of generic campaign. Hell, Karl Franz in Warhammer 3 is a great generic campaign. I gotta feel bad for the people who start Warhammer 3, even to this day, who start Warhammer 3 and think like Miao Ying or Katrin, who are kind of like the poster childs of this game, along with Be'lakor. They start a campaign, they just bought Warhammer 3, and then they start the campaign as either Katrin or Miao Ying, because those are the two worst campaigns for their respective races. Now, unlike Katrin, Miao Ying actually is worth playing. She's like Katrin's Flow, not worth playing. Miao Ying is just like worse than Xiao Ming and Yan Bo in a lot of ways, but those ways do actually matter. So beyond the lackluster faction effects, there's other issues as well. I won't dive too much into the Lord effects situation. I mean, the Lord effects are good. I mean, you do get recruit rank, upkeep, benefits, missile strength. Okay, those are good Lord effects. But the reason I won't dive into it is because when you're playing a Cathay campaign as Yan Bo or Xiao Ming, it is very easy to confederate Miao Ying. So any Lord effect or faction effect or special skill line that she has, you can get access to fairly regularly when you're playing Yan Bo or Xiao Ming. You don't even really have to go completely out of your way. Yes, there are some situations where Confederation can be more difficult, but this is where we get into one of the primary reasons why it's actually now worth playing Miao Ying compared to the other two Cathay and Legendary Lords. See, Confederation can either be really easy or really difficult in campaigns. It depends primarily on the strength ranking situation between your faction and another faction. So if you're much stronger than another faction and they're losing, especially, it will be much easier to confederate them. Then you look at Yao Ming, and you look at Yan Bo. One of the things that both Yan Bo and Yao Ming have in common is that they are in relatively safe positions. So the AI, regardless of AI shenanigans, I rarely see these guys getting wiped out, or at least getting wiped out early on. So more often than not, if you just leave Yan Bo and Yao Ming on their own and you're not screwing them over, it's going to be very difficult to confederate them. In fact, if you're playing a campaign as Yao Ming and you're trying to get Yan Bo, or if you're playing Yan Bo and trying to get Yao Ming, you have to play in such a specific way that you're limiting his expansion of territory so you can guarantee that confederation. That does not apply in Miao Ying's case, because Miao Ying's AI, ever since the release of Realms of Chaos, has been pretty terrible. In fact, that was the main reason you would want to play her campaign. See, what will Miao Ying's AI do? At least what I've seen on Legendary, with all the patches and all that. She'll take this province of Land of Stone and Steel, then she'll probably get involved in a war with Snitch, and then the Great Bastion will be obliterated by both Village and Zaytan, who will then promptly take over the Great Bastion and then declare war on Miao Ying and wipe her out while she's busily dealing with Snitch. Sometimes she gets lucky and survives, sure, or more likely Yao Ming bails her out by fighting Snitch for her, or she gets lucky lucky enough to defeat Snitch before the Great Bastion gets overwhelmed. But like 19% of cases or even higher, most of the time that is kind of the dynamic that's going to happen. Which means that if you're playing a campaign as Yan Bo or Yao Ming, sure, it's going to suck losing the Great Bastion and wanting to rebuild it, which, by the way, you are kind of forced to do in every campaign because, you know, random armies, all the factions over here. Absolutely. So it does suck losing the Bastion. You typically don't want that to happen. And Miao Ying is in the best situation to prevent that from happening. But on the flip side, there are ways to handle that if you're playing Yao Ming or Yan Bo. Get vision with this faction as quickly as possible. Sell the Dragon Crossroads to Zaytan with the barracks in it. Declare war on Village with Zaytan as a military ally and watch them wipe each other out. That's a strategy, by the way. It actually does work. More often than not. You can pull it off. It's a bit finicky, I'm not going to lie, but it is workable. And then but even if the Great Bastion doesn't fall, Miao Ying inherently is going to be much easier to confederate because she has a more limited expansion of territory. Like, even in the best case for her AI, where, you know, the Great Bastion doesn't get destroyed, she still has Snitch. But even if you deal with Snitch, then that just means the territorial expansion she has is still going to be very limited, which makes her easier to confederate because of strength ranking differences. So, if you're playing a Cathay campaign, or if you're playing a campaign in general, being able to confederate other legendary lords with near certainty is a net benefit. And that is one of the fundamental issues that she has in her campaign. Also, she's kind of worst dragon to fight in battles. Like, her special skill line is pretty good from a campaign standpoint, though construction cost, as I mentioned, is pointless. Yes, even a minus freaking 60% construction cost benefit for the Great Bastion is meaningless. Never mind the fact that 40% of that you can get for Confederation, and it's much easier to confederate her. She does have range, reload time reduction, etc. Absolutely, but as a dragon, and you do almost always want the dragons to be in dragon form because you're lacking a melee-capable hero, so you don't really want to use them for casting capability, you want to use them for melee capability. She's really the worst out of the bunch. Like, Yan Bo may not be the best in dragon form, I agree, but he's a freaking executioner in human form. Like, he's really good in terms of human form, but he's also pretty good in dragon form as well. Yao Ming is really good in dragon form, and pretty decent as caster. Miao Ying is the worst of the dragons from the perspective of her dragon capability, and she's also not really that great as a caster either. Like Xiao Ming and Yan Bo are both better casters, better melee, better dragons. So exactly what does Miao Ying have to offer? And again, it's kind of a shame because she is the poster child of this game, and she's literally the poster child of Cathay on the tabletop because they're using her as the first character they're introducing with that. Games Workshop has. I do think that they need to redefine the Great Bastion situation. And yes, the Confederation issue is a problem. She does need better faction effects. I do wish to emphasize, and I think this is a point that a lot of people miss out, that it does work. You can play any campaign in this game and make it work. Just because you can make it work doesn't mean it's good. That's the difference. You can play Daniel, the Demon Prince, and make it work. Does that mean he's a good Legendary Lord just because you can make it work? No. Absolutely not. It's like playing Counter-Strike with the shittiest possible pistol in that game and saying, well, it's not bad because we can make it work. Yeah, it's still a bad weapon. That's kind of the same situation with Legendary Lords or various units or mechanics in the game. You can make it work, but that doesn't mean they're good or well designed. I've always found that disappointing about Miao Ying's campaign in Warhammer 3. And hopefully that will change going forward. So if we get another Cathay in DLCs, and I do certainly expect that, they will improve this campaign. And actually, they'll just improve Cathay across the board. Like, yes, I would like a better campaign for Xiao Ming. I would like a better campaign for Yan Bo. But I would absolutely like to have a reason whatsoever to play Miao Ying as opposed to just, let me start up my 100th campaign as Yao Ming because he's ultimately the best Legendary Lord of Cathay to play, simply because he doesn't have a fucking jungle start, and because he has a bunch of faction effects, lord effects, and dynamics of his campaign that make it freaking work. That's my perspective. Quentin signing out.